Research shows that 10 out of 10 people will die, yet we act like it's not going to happen to us. Now, I've heard some of you are a bit nervous today, wondering, is she going to talk about the D word? You know, the elephant in the room? Death? Yes. And I invite you to listen and consider how death informs and transforms our lives. I am well aware not everyone is guaranteed a long life. You see, I learned about death many years ago, and it woke me up to life. I was a bright-eyed, full of life 15-year-old, and my 19-year-old brother was killed in an accident at work. Only 9 months later, my 44-year-old dad died of a massive heart attack. I was the youngest in my family. He was my rock, my world. When I was little, he taught me to dance, my feet on top of his. We'd sway to the music of Bing Crosby and Frank Sinatra, and he'd twirl me around the room. I felt like a princess. My brother and dad's deaths changed my life forever. I witnessed the collapse of my mother's dreams, of our family dreams. I remember saying I didn't get a chance to say goodbye, to tell them I loved them. And I saw my life in 2 parts, before their death and after. And I never looked at life the same because, you see, I knew it could be gone in an instant. The events of their death profoundly impacted how I lived my life and the career path I chose. I am an end-of-life doula. Now, you may be wondering what that is, but first let me tell you how I got here. Several years after they died, I was in my nursing school classroom. I remember the moment the instructor turned on the movie projector. I was mesmerized as I watched and learned about the life and work of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She was the pioneer of the death and dying movement. Someone was finally speaking my unspoken language. I wanted to learn more. I wanted to talk about this. But I quickly realized very few were comfortable talking about death, especially at my young age. So I set my thoughts aside, but they stayed with me as if saying, not yet, but one day. My love for children, including my own, led me to become a pediatric nurse practitioner and a child and adolescent therapist. I loved my work, yet I knew my professional journey was not complete. I just didn't know what lied ahead. 5 years ago, I began volunteering on the local pediatric palliative care team. I witnessed parents having to say goodbye to their newborn baby only moments after birth, before they had a chance to say hello. I've sat with parents who prepared to say goodbye to their child, a child they nurtured and loved, thought they'd have many years together, a lifetime to create memories together. I knew I wanted to be there to support them. I wanted to support parents in helping their child have a softer landing, a better death. I wanted to support them in their grief. I wanted to be someone that I wish my family had when my brother and dad died. I now know that all my life experiences led me to become an end-of-life doula. The seeds had been planted many years before. So what is an end-of-life doula? Well, you may have heard of a birth doula. Just as birth doulas help individuals and families bring babies into this world, an end-of-life doula helps individuals and families as their loved one prepares to exit this world. My role is vast, from helping create end-of-life plans to educating about the death and dying process. I'm there to help families sort through what really matters for their loved one and themselves. I'm also there to guide them through their grief before, during, and after their loved one dies. Death is a part of life. It's as sacred as birth is, yet we often create these elaborate birth plans and just let death happen. It quickly becomes a medical event rather than a human event. And unfortunately, too many medical decisions are often made in crisis. We need to do death better. Death reminds us how valuable life is. It reminds us what to pay attention to. And I do believe there is such a thing as dying well, and there are things worse than death. I was asked to support a family in the ICU. As I entered the room, I heard the beeping of the monitors. I saw an elderly woman unconscious on a ventilator. She was surrounded by her family, her sister, and 3 adult children. They looked helpless, but their love for her was palpable. A moment later, a doctor walked in and said, "I'm sorry. The treatments are no longer working. We need to talk about next steps." She looked at the adult children and said, "If your mom could speak, what would she want?" "We don't know. She never told us. We never talked about it." The aunt said, "You never had a conversation about this?" Let me ask you here today, if you were with your loved one at the end of their life and the doctor asked you the same question, would you know how to answer it? Would you know what they want? The fact is, only 30% of people create end-of-life documents and share them with their loved ones. So I'm guessing the other 70% didn't want to think about it, talk about it, never got around to it. We are all going to die at some point, so why not plan for it? We've tucked death away in institutions. We fear talking about it, yet it used to be a part of life. It happened in the home. Funerals happened in the home. Now, I get it. It's scary to talk about it, right? We've never done it before. It's the big unknown. And actually, research is showing us that our brains are not wired to process our own death, only the death of others. It's a self-protective mechanism. But here's the thing I do know. The more you talk about it, the less you'll fear it. And I believe the more you plan for it, the better death you will have. Again, we've got to start doing death better in this country. As an end-of-life doula, I help people die well. More importantly, I help them live well. As a conscious living and dying coach, I love working with people of all ages to help them live their best life possible and create their best death possible. I recently looked into the eyes of an 85-year-old man. His eyes shifted around the room. He'd been diagnosed with a life-limiting illness. He wasn't dying, but he knew most likely his time would be shortened. He said, "Well, I can tell you one thing. Nobody knows when they're going to die, and I'm not letting this diagnosis stop me from living." I asked him, I said, "Let's just pretend. What if you knew you only had 3 months to live? Is there anything you would change, do differently?" He said, 3 months? That's not enough time. I have a lot I want to do and create. He quickly realized how precious his time was and began planning not only the end of his life, but how he wanted to live the rest of his life. Let me ask you today, if you knew you only had 6 months left to live, how would you spend your time, and with who? I realized after the deaths in my family how precious time really was and how easily it could be taken away. My brother and dad were not gifted more time, but I have been, and so have you. I don't want to waste any of it. Now, some of you may be thinking, time? I don't have time. My days are packed. My calendar's stacked. I can't find the time. Here's the thing. You don't find time. You create it. And if not now, when? I want to leave you today with 3 things you can start doing. Actually, I challenge you. Prepare your end-of-life documents. Have these important conversations with your loved ones, no matter what age you are. Your loved ones will thank you. Number 2, be present in your life. Be present to yourself, to your experiences, to those that matter to you. And finally, say yes to your precious life. Death makes life possible. It's not out there waiting for you at the end. It's nudging you, asking you to wake up and live life fully now. You see, it's really quite simple. Dying well begins with living well. Thank you.